And then you get to the airport. At the airport, the bus halted near pockmarked runways. We exited solemnly through a crowd of people, and by microphone we were told to walk to our receiving officer. When our names were called, as I heard my name, I stepped past a table where Vietnamese and American representatives marked off the exchange. I saluted a colonel, then another, and was escorted by an officer who was so excited he could say nothing more than, "Isn't it great? It's so nice to have you back. We've all been waiting for you. Isn't it great?" I felt as though he had previously composed what he would say, but in his excitement, his record stuck. He was right. It was great. I walked up on the ramp of the C-141 and saw the first Navy uniform. The officer inside that uniform grabbed me and hugged me and told me his name. I didn't know him until he told me he was the briefing officer on the Kitty Hawk the day I was shot down. Gary Morrow and I had once worked many hours together, and now we could joyfully recall old times. As soon as I was in the airplane, a nurse kissed me and started the first of a long chain of flash bulbs. We were given American cigarettes, magazines, and information sheets telling us what to expect at Clark Air Force Base. The pilot taxied down the runway, pushed the throttles, and at the moment of liftoff, suddenly it hit us. We were off North Vietnamese soil. We screamed above the noise of the engines. Minutes later, we were soaring above the Gulf of Tonkin and saw some of our ships. The commander of the 7th Fleet sent a message of welcome, and Jim returned the radio comm with a thankful acknowledgement. By nightfall, we reached the Philippines and Clark Air Force Base. As soon as the doors opened, we could see and hear the enthusiasm from what must have been 5,000 people. Banners and bands, choral groups and cheerleaders, everyone seemed to be there. I walked down the ramp, saluted a general, and then an admiral. As I shook the admiral's hand, I was so overcome with emotion that I hugged him. So you hugged the admiral.
That was embarrassing. I don't know why I did that. It was just one of those
sir, can I maybe take a stab at that? You've been gone for 6.5 years. I would have hugged him. I think I would have kissed him. It'd been on. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. You're allowed to hug the admiral when you come home after that. No, that's. Okay. But I could tell when you wrote that, you were sort of like, "Oh, what did I just do?" But,
exactly.
Overcome with emotions, and then you start kind of the in-processing thing. And that had to be when they start handing you magazines and cigarettes and food and all that. You go into that somewhat in here when they're just, how overwhelming is that?
That was wonderful. It was joyful.
I was reading through some Vietnam POW poetry, and I got caught. I was just looking for background. I want to learn more, and people express themselves in poetry, and I got locked into probably a dozen poems that was nothing but different foods, like raspberry cake and steak and milk and chocolate milk and everything. There was like a dozen poems that were just about food. So,
my favorite one was Jerry Coffey wrote a poem. It was called "Ode to a Weevil," and the poem was, "Little weevil in my bread, I think I just bit off your head." That was it.
Yeah,
that was the end of the poem.
All you need to know.
That was the end of the weevil, too.
It's kind of dope.